Welcome to the Grandpa Channel, where stories don't fade, they get recorded. I'm Steve Harris. My grandkids call me Rivers. This podcast is where grandpas and grandchildren pull up a chair, turn on a mic, and let her rip. Grandpa stories are chock full of wisdom, life lessons, and frankly, funny as hell. Your stories are the magic elixir to help your grandkids navigate Mr. Toad's wild ride, aka life. Let's Grandpa. This episode of the Grandpa Channel is brought to you by Hires Big H, home of wonderful hamburgers, French fries, onion rings, the magical and medicinal, so I say, root beer freeze. Head to Hires and treat yourself like the legend that you are. Now back to the channel. Welcome to the first episode of the Grandpa Channel. I have a special guest. She is my daughter. She is a triplet, and she lives in Manhattan.
I do.
Right in Manhattan. Tell us where you live.
I live on the Upper West Side.
Wow. I feel like I have a lot more street cred as a father if I tell people that I have children living in Manhattan.
I know, soon not to have street cred though.
Yeah, that's right.
So
you're moving
I'm
back.
moving back to Utah next month.
So now
enjoy it.
I gotta tell my audience, and I'm trying to keep this short, that I'm a little nervous because I have a face made for radio. And I'm a little self-conscious, but when I have lovely, beautiful guests, I'll hopefully blossom, and this will be really So here we go. You have two grandfathers that are completely different and utterly different.
Yep.
Kind of some similar stories, but some very dissimilar stories too. Different personalities, but both fabulous people.
Totally.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about your Grandpa Lou? I'm a little prejudiced. This is my dad, who is one of my great heroes. And so tell us a little bit. What made Lou an interesting guy?
Well, he was honestly, I think, the family fave. Everyone loves Grandpa Lou. And it was so interesting though, because I think from the surface level, he was really intimidating. Mm-hmm. Like, at least I remember my boss, Becky Rogers at Rich's Bagels, would be like, I would never want to talk to your grandpa at church, because he has this kind of this more reserved, he's a handsome guy. He was very kind of intimidating. But then when you got to know him, he had this really fun, goofy, warm sense of humor. And he was just the life of the party. We loved him.
Becky told me that she had a crush on him.
Yes, I believe it, and he was just so kind.
Yeah.
And I think there was just this warmth. He always rooted for the underdog. He was always looking out for the underdog. And so when you started chatting with him, you were always just put at ease.
So give us a little bit of a description about how would you describe Lou in a few sentences? What would you say?
For sure, like intimidating, classy, but also goofy. And that's what I loved about him, because he just was kind of surprising in the best way. And he was funny. He loved to sing and dance, but then he was like an avid Utah fan. And, if they lost a game, he wouldn't sleep all night. And then he would wear his Utah attire to church. And he was, we loved him. He was funny, and he loved his wife, Momor, and just adored her. And he just believed in all of us, which I love.
Are there a couple of experiences that come to your mind when you think about Grandpa Lou?
Yeah, like he totally was quirky, which I loved, like he'd drink buttermilk and, and he would love musicals and, and it was always the best going to like the Huntsman Center, because he'd give us a 20. And then we're like, wow, we could really get a lot with this 20, So, you would get Dippin' Dots, because you would never buy us Dippin' Dots. So I learned really quickly I could go to Lou and then I could buy some Dippin' Dots and get red vine and Coke.
It was principle to me. I just wasn't going to do it. So
I think one story came to mind where I was in high school, and I was just having a hard time in high school. I tried really hard and wanted to be a basketball player, and I have no athletic ability, but somehow miraculously made the team. And I did my first year as a sophomore team on Brighton High School's basketball team. And I remember after that season, this was my junior year, I decided not to try out again, just because it just wasn't worth it in my mind. And I was sad about it. And I remember having a terrible day. I don't remember what happened, but I found a ride home. But I didn't want to go home to to like Queenie's house because I knew I knew I'd get in trouble. So I had them drop me off at Lou's house, which is like a mile away. And somehow Eliza scored too. Like she came for the ride too. So it was Eliza and me. And I remember I just burst into tears when I walked into the house and Lou was like, didn't know kind of what to do, but you could tell he was concerned. So next thing he's telling me, he's like, we're going to go to Hires. So we jumped into Hires Big H is this really great burger joint in Salt Lake City that's been around forever. They have the best shakes and burgers and fries. And that was just kind of our go-to family spot forever. And so he gets in the car and he drives Eliza and I, and he's like, order whatever you want on the menu. So we did. And it was the best because he just listened and I just felt so loved and supported. And then on the way home, it was to the point where he really shouldn't have keys to his car. And he was trying to drive on Fort Union on like oncoming traffic and like make a left-hand turn. And Eliza and I were like, we're going to die. Like, but it was the best. And I always remember that. And he just loved me because he was a good athlete himself. And I was never amazing, but he always just kind of believed in me. And he never once made a comment about me and basketball. He was always just very supportive. And looking back, I'm like, that meant the world to me. So.
Any other stories that kind of popped into your mind?
This was right after Mumor passed away. So just for context for your listeners, Mumor passed away, was it 6 weeks before Grandpa Lou?
10.
Okay, 10. And this is at a point where we didn't realize that he was going to leave us so soon. So it was right after Mumor passed away from a heart attack. And we were up there. It was me, Eliza, my triplet sister, and then my cousin Sam. We're all around the same age. And we're with him and he's brushing his teeth and he's like breaking out and dance, just dancing and grooving. And we just busted out laughing because it was such a sad time. And I think all of us were just so grateful that he was still with us. And so memories like that. And he'd always want you to cuddle with him on the couch. And he was always so complimentary and believed in you. And, everyone thought he was his favorite. I know Emily for sure thinks that. And so does Liza and Sam and everyone. But he had this ability of making you feel like you were his favorite.
How did he do that, do you think?
I think he just loved. I think sometimes we overcomplicate love, but I think he just really met us where we were. And he just loved us. And he cared about us and he wanted to know and be in the details of our lives. Like he'd come to my basketball games or my piano recitals or, he wanted to know what was going on in school and, he'd give you $20 and you thought you'd hit the jackpot. And so to me, I think he just really loved us.
Do you know much about his background at all?
Yeah.
Tell me what you understand.
And you'll correct me if I'm wrong, but he kind of grew up on the wrong side of the tracks. He had an alcoholic dad. I don't believe they had a ton of money and he got kind of shipped around a lot, right?
Yep.
Yeah. And, he started smoking at the age of 5, decided it wasn't for him.
Quit at age 7.
7. Okay, there we go. 7.
Said he broke the nicotine habit at age 7.
He got in a lot of like ward basketball fights.
Yeah, he did.
Broke his nose
11 times.
There we go.
Yeah.
So he was rough around the edges, and that's what I really love about him is because he kind of took that, and instead of letting it define him, I think it was a very much a core part of him, but he let that kind of soften him and help that. I feel like he was very intentional with the type of dad, husband, and grandpa he wanted to be, and I think his upbringing made him hungry for that.
He had virtually no relationship with his dad. His dad was not a mean drunk, but he was a sad drunk, and apparently a very intelligent. He learned Italian and German because he worked in POW camps during World War II when they shipped out some of the prisoners of war out here, and but he had no example, home example. And I will tell you that he was very concerned about whether or not his dad was proud of him. And he was very concerned and nervous about what was going to happen on the other side of the veil. Was his dad going to be there, and what was going to go on?
Was he proud?
Yeah, was he proud of me?
Of who he became.
And this is a man who did very well in business, but more than that, he was just an exemplary husband, and treated my mom, your more like $1 million. What are kind of lessons, things that pop into your mind when you think about your grandpa?
I think of hard work, and I think rooting for the underdog. I think also being intentional and living and creating the life that you want to live, because he basically created a life that he didn't have growing up. But yeah, I think the first thing, like I said, is hard work. I feel like he was very hardworking. I mean, he had nothing when he married Lamore, and he built like a really beautiful life off of hard work.
Here's my next question for you. I have this theory that all grandfathers have a superpower or two or three or four or many superpowers. What do you think Grandpa Lou's superpower was?
Okay, that's a hard one. I think warmth comes to mind. He was such a warm person, but I think if I really had to nail it down, I think he knew how to love.
Where do you think he picked that up from? Yeah,
and I don't know, because you think that maybe that could have been modeled to him, and obviously I'm sure his mother was, I've never met her, but I'm sure she was lovely, and I'm sure his dad would have been lovely too, given a different circumstances, but I don't know where he learned that, but I do think that was something that he was just inherently really good at. And I think he had such a presence about him that I think was his superpower too.
I think one of his superpowers is he had this cheeriness that even during really hard times, he wasn't brain dead cheery, but he was cheery in tough times. And because it was realistic cheeriness, you listened to him, I think. Did anything else jump out at you as a superpower?
His humor. Yeah. He was really funny. He had this patio outside that we would just go and chat, and he was very generous.
Yeah, he was.
It kind of felt like, as a kid, I thought I hit the jackpot. It's like they have a candy closet and a toy room that I could never go in. Like, it was just very alluring. Mama always kept it locked. But like when we did get to go in the one or two times, I thought I died and gone to heaven.
And then they just gave up.
Yeah. I don't blame them, because now with like your grandkids, I'm like, oh my gosh, it takes like a whole week to put the house back together again. But he was just, 4th of July was the best. And he was so like, I can see where Andrew gets his intensity and his like bee in his bonnet that we all kind of drives us crazy, but he would just,
it's
like
6:30.
we're like, it doesn't get dark till night, but he was just, and the music, the patriarchal, or with the
patriotic.
Oh man. But anyway, that's not my superpower, is words. But anyways, but I mean, he would blast it, and he'd buy all this crazy fancy fireworks, and he'd lure us with popcorn in that big popcorn case. And
Popcorn
by 7
popper.
p.m. we're thinking it's not going to be late for at least another hour and a half.
He's like all
he's just kind of one track mind. And so we loved it for the most part, and then sometimes I think it drove us crazy.
But we all laughed about it.
Totally, yeah.
He had a couple of things that just kind of came to mind. I don't think you know about this, but they used to have what they called singing telegrams. And his joke was that the telegram person would come to the door, and the person said, "Telegram," and the woman would say, that answered the door, she'd say, "Well, you're going to sing it, aren't you?" And he goes, "Yes, ma'am, I will." "Your sister Rose is dead." That was how, I mean, he would pull that one out of the hat.
Yeah.
And then he had this funny little couplet that he came across. I'm sure he didn't himself, but I went to go sit on a chair, but the bottom wasn't there. No legs, no back, but I just sat, ignoring little things like that. And I think that's kind of that points out he had this great sense of humor, and it was not an inappropriate sense of humor. And I think that, he was just quite a remarkable guy.
Yeah,
okay, so now for the next 45 minutes, I want you to tell me what my superpowers are. I'm just joking. Okay. Anyway, but anything else that you want to say about your Grandpa Lou?
Honestly, like, I think sometimes you think that your impact or your legacy doesn't really make too much of an impact with those around you. But it's interesting how, even though as small as some of my interactions were with him, but they made the biggest difference in my life. And I think we forget that. And so I think, even though he's been gone, gosh, I think 12 years now.
Coming up on 12.
Yeah, I think there's not a day that, like, if I drive past to the street or go over by the Willow Creek Country Club or go to the Huntsman Center or Rice Eccles Stadium, I always think of Grandpa Lou. And I think sometimes we just need to remember that we do have impact, and
it's small things sometimes.
Small things and drops in the bucket, right? That really, and that maybe I've forgotten about, but it's like I always felt so loved by Grandpa Lou, and he was like my number one fan, and that's really like lived on in my.
If you had this vast audience that we have right now, but if you had a vast audience of grandpas who are itching to up level their game,
love it.
What advice would you have based on Grandpa Lou?
Meet them where they're at.
I like that,
because I think true power comes in someone's life when someone loves you as is. No expectations of what you look like. You know, I mean, growing up, I was a late bloomer, curvy. I loved my Doritos, you know, like
Cafe Rio.
Right, Cafe Rio, Yolanda, like
exactly.
You know, but he loved me and in all my phases of life, and you know, and I think he met me where I was at, and he made me believe I could do anything.
Very cool.
Yeah. And so to me, if we're going tactile here, I think, you know, make eye contact, sit down with them, ask them how they're doing, and just listen. You're great at that. That is your superpower, you know, and really, really listen, because it takes a while sometimes for a teenager to open up, or young single adult. But when they feel that you love them and you're meeting them where they're at, and there's no conditions for that love, it's huge.
Let's talk about Grandpa Hank.
Okay.
And give us a little bit of background about Grandpa Hank.
Oh man, I love Grandpa Hool. He was the opposite of Grandpa Lou, but in the best way, because I think it just goes to show that you have to be you. Because if Lou tried to be Grandpa Hool and Grandpa Hool tried to be Lou, it would just wouldn't work. And I'll have to tell you a funny story at the end too, because it's funny. They were very competitive with each other. But with Grandpa Hool, he's more serious, very a man of few words.
Can I give a little bit of background?
Oh yeah, Grandpa so Hool. He grew up in Amsterdam. He joined the church when he was 18 or 19. Do you remember?
I think it was 17.
Was it 17? Oh, I think he immigrated at 19.
Yeah.
So he joined the church, immigrated when he was 19, and I think he had, I'll have to go back and read his life story, but didn't he have like $1.50 or $1.25
didn't have much money in his pocket.
And he's just the definition of discipline and hard work and consistency.
Faithfulness.
Oh my gosh. If that was his superpower, he was such an example of faith. He never wavered. He always put the Lord first. And he's a beautiful example of what happens when you put the Lord first. He created a really beautiful family and life for himself. And he did it out of nothing with the Lord's help, you know? Yeah.
So tell us our funny story.
Oh, well, they were very competitive with each other, and they both had Parkinson's. And they died, just for your readers' context, they died within, 3 days of each other?
They were in the same mortuary.
Yeah, which we were like stiff as boards.
This is great.
And it was at Winston's wedding, and they both technically needed walkers at that point. And this is very on brand for Grandpa Hool. Dutiful, rule follower. He was there with his walker, not happy about it, but he was there with his walker. And then Lou comes tumbling by, and it's like uneven grass. We're all watching him, like, he is going to turf it.
He's going to turf.
Like, and we're going to watch. And we told him, he's like, you need your walker. And Lou just ignored us.
Yeah.
Like, he was just too good for it.
Yeah.
So Grandpa Hool is sitting with Darrell, his wife, at a table. And here comes Lou, biggest grin on his face. And he knows full well that he should have a walker. He walks right by Grandpa Hool and then walks a little further, then stops. Or no, he keeps walking, and Grandpa Hool was like, Lou, come here. I need to tell you something.
Yeah.
So Lou comes over, and mind you, he's like hunched over because he's like can barely walk up straight.
Yeah.
And Grandpa Lou was, and Lou goes up to Grandpa Hool and says, yeah, Hank? And Hank looks at him and says, I want you to know that I only use my walker on special occasions. And we saw this and we bursted out laughing, but that was kind of their relationship a little bit. I think they both really liked each other, but they were so different in how they went about living their lives, and both really competitive, but it was so funny.
Well, both of them were fabulous examples, you know, to their kids, their grandkids, great-grandkids. And anyway, they were both so admirable in so many different ways, but different ways.
Totally.
Yeah. Oh,
yeah. And
funny.
one thing I loved about Grandpa Hoole is he was a man of few words, but you always knew where he stood with the gospel, and he treated, both grandpas treated their wives like $1 million. But I just really, you know, I think with Grandpa Hoole, he really let my grandma shine, Darl. You know, Darl's written a lot of books. She spoke all over the world to different relief societies, and he was her #1 fan.
Yeah.
And I love that about him.
Yeah, that's great. So his superpowers, faithfulness. I would say discipline. Because he would wake up at a certain time. He'd go running every morning. He would take like a little 20-minute cat nap during the day. He worked really hard, and he was just so disciplined. And because of that, he really was able to create a really beautiful life. Okay. And full of and lots of grandkids. And, you know, he would, you know, it was funny though, because Grandpa Lou would give me $20 to go buy whatever I pleased, you know, maybe if it was a Coke product. The change.
Keep the change. And I'm like, really, as a kid, you thought you hit the jackpot, you know? And then Grandpa Hoole was giving me Jesus the Christ at 8 for my birthday. I really have come to really love that. Yeah. You know, because
that was his
they
brand.
both were different, but they were true to their brands. And they both have made a very big impact in my way. I feel like Grandpa Hoole has really been looking out for me from above, because Grandma and I, Darl, Hank's wife, I've really become buddies with. And I really feel like Grandpa Hoole's up there, you know, orchestrating things for me. I feel that. Yeah.
Okay. So now I get to do a little bit of bragging.
Okay.
To the thousands, hundreds of thousands of people that are watching this, but I want to do a little bit of bragging about you.
Okay.
And I want to point out that this amazing triplet daughter of mine, she's a triplet. She's the oldest of the 3. We had 4 children. We call them the founders. and we were living in this tiny brick bungalow in a cute part of Salt Lake City, 900 square foot up, 900 square feet down. And my wife and I made this crazy decision to go for one more. And we knew we were going to have to move. And instead of getting just our 5th child, we ended up with 5, 6, and 7. So there are 2 girls, and then there's 1 boy. And Abby. So anyway, this is, Abby has some amazing superpowers herself. And she's starting out on this wonderful journey as a life coach. And she has magical, I believe that with all my heart, magical powers with women, especially younger women.
I do.
And tell me what you think your magical powers.
My power is to teach and to help people up-level their lives. And I think as women, we tend to get stuck in negative thought patterns or stories about ourselves and about the world. And my superpower is I really help women get unstuck and live the life that they are meant to live.
And she's great.
Yeah.
She's coached me. That's why we have thousands and thousands and thousands of followers. But we're getting there. And anyway, I want to thank and tell my daughter how much I love her and how wonderful she is.
I'm so honored. The first episode.
You are the first guest in the first episode.
I love it.
That's it for today's episode of the Grandpa Channel. Leave a review, share it with a friend, or better yet, tell your favorite grandpa. We're on a mission to gather 1 million grandpas, storytellers, wisdom keepers, and lovable wild cards. Until next time, keep the mic hot, the memories fresh, and the jokes just slightly inappropriate. I'm out of here.